El videomapping serveix de vegades per crear, no de vegades, la majoria, per crear a través d'efectes molt espectaculars sorpresa en el públic. Però també és una espècie de suport, és un format que serveix també per explicar històries i que es poden utilitzar les tècniques del cinema com el guió o com fer storyboards. Tots aquests trucs que ajuden a explicar històries en el món del film també es poden fer servir en el món del mapping. A part, el Filip forma part d'un col·lectiu que ell ha ajudat a fundar, que es diu School Mapping, que estan especialitzats en tecnologia i art. I ara ja sí. It's all yours, Filip. Please, welcome him.
Thank you. So, my name is FILIP STERCKX. I started working with projection in 2003, and back then I was studying animation film, and I started to experiment with dia projection and 8mm projection and started to project on different surfaces. And I'm also part of the Skull Mapping Collective together with Anton Verbeek, and we've started to create mappings in 2011. So I consider myself, because people ask me what do I do, and it's kind of hard to explain because it goes in different directions in a way. I mean, for me it feels like one thing, but to explain to people, so I usually say I'm something between a filmmaker and visual artist. So the last year I've been mainly working on skull mapping because that's growing in a nice way, and we get a lot of projects. So we've invested a lot of time in this now the last year. And before I've been doing installations, art installations, music videos, short films, some commercial work, of course. And I used to do visuals for dance or theater, and also like in clubs, like VJings, as many of you, I guess. This is kind of, because last year I was here and give a presentation about my work, so I'm not gonna go through every installation again. I'm just gonna quickly show like a selection of projects that I've did. So this is like an art installation. It's a projection on a sculpture, and it's the first time that I used a digital projection, because before I really loved to work with dia projection, because the digital projection, I mean, in that period was okay because this was like HD ready, but before it was the quality of just standard definition was horrible in comparison to dia projection. And so I made another installation like this. It's like a bot, which is quite small actually, and you see slowly like it starts covered in milk, and as the water goes down, this person is revealed. And this is actually the last installation I made. This was part of the festival last year. It's also quite small. It's like a sculpture with a projection on it, a short story. And these are some of the music videos I've made. This is 2 walls with projection on it, and a projection on the floor, and the singer is on a treadmill walking through this virtual environment. And in this music video I use like projections to create transitions between different scenes. And this is it's like a frame-by-frame projection on clay, and I animated the clay stop motion-wise to match with the projection of the face. And I really like the texture it creates. It's was a lot of hard work to create all these frames and to create all the different sculptures, but I really like the look of it. And this is a music video, not with projections. It's everything based with mirrors. And this is the last music video I've made this year. It's like a guy swinging a light, and then it's like a lot of layers, a lot of layers on top of each other every time, just adding what is bright, let's say. So you get this kind of it starts off really dark, and then the more the music video progresses, the more this kind of church becomes illuminated. So, and then the next one is the skull mapping show reel. This is also a short selection of the works we've been making over the years. That's it. I want to talk a bit about my background, because I think it's quite different from a lot of people that are in this room, or at least what I noticed last year. So I studied animation film, and I was not really your average student, and I want to say why that I was always looking to do new things. For example, we got this assignment that we had to come up with a character, draw a character, and write like a biography for that character, and like invent hobbies for that character. And my character, I didn't want him to have hobbies. And my teacher was saying to me, that's impossible because everybody has some kind of fascination, but I just didn't want him to have hobbies, just to be different or not to follow these rules. So, and that's also one of the reasons actually that I started to do VJing, because I didn't want to, in animation, it takes so much time because you have to write your script, you have to design your characters, your backgrounds, you have to make like a storyboard. So it takes so much time to actually like produce 1 minute of animation. And I just wanted to take my camera and go on the street and start to experiment and show also all these experiments. So that was, in VJing, I could do that just in a club and kind of have this, let's say, some sort of visual diarrhea and throw that onto the crowd at a club. And in a way, I think also this kind of state of mind that I was always looking to try different things brought me to projection mapping. And as you can see from the project, sometimes I use storytelling, but in a lot of other projects I don't. Although I have to say now, thinking about this when I was making this presentation, I do think that the projects that connected the most to an audience were the projects that involved some sort of storytelling. So, I mean, I'm just explaining this because I was not your average animation film student. So for me, it's quite strange to give actually a lecture on storytelling, because I don't consider, if my teachers from in college knew that I would be now giving a lecture on storytelling, they would think that would be quite weird, because a lot of the things I was doing was not traditional storytelling. Last year, so I was here, and that was quite an eye-opener to see that there's so many people from different backgrounds, like graphic designers and engineers and architects and fine arts. But I found it really weird that there's almost no one with a film or animation film background. And also a lot of the projects that I saw when I was doing the tour, they didn't use storytelling. And I felt that it's kind of unbalanced, because for me, mapping is very much a cinematic experience. It's essentially a big projection in the dark and a lot of people watching it. So it's, for me, that's very close to going to a theater or to cinema. So, and the big question is how to keep an audience interested and entertained over time. And also the big question in last year of the whole Congress was like how to move away from this kind of fireworks, let's say. And for me, that became very clear is to involve storytelling. And the next project I want to show you is one of my art installations. It was not in real before, in which I also projected on sculpture. And it was the first installation in which I used quite elaborate storytelling. And actually, the story itself is quite simple. It's about this little boy. It's like a family, and it's a miniature kind of house with different rooms. And I shot it different rooms, and I pasted them all together to create like one, as if you would look at an open house. And it's like a bedtime ritual of that family. That boys go to brush his teeth, and he goes into bed, and his mother comes to read him a story. And then it turns into kind of like a nightmare for that boy, and strange things start to happen in the house. I'm gonna skip through it a bit. And this, of course, is much better to see it in real life than to see it in a, because it's so much also is about the sculpture and how the projection works on that. So it turns into, because he goes to the bathroom and he discovers his parents are gone. And you have kind of these kind of ghost-like creatures moving through the house. And in the end, it turns out it's all just a dream. So the story is actually quite simple. I didn't know when I was creating this how this would work, because it's like a very small format. It's quite long also, it's over 10 minutes. And what I found, because this was, it's an art piece, so it was at an exposition. And often, I mean, the audience, they enter that room where you work is usually in the middle, for example. So it's not like they're arriving at the start and then they see the whole build-up of the story. And also, it's only a limited amount of audience that can see the work at the same time. But to my surprise, people watch it multiple times. I got like an email from an 80-year-old guy who was really touched by it because it brought him back to the state of mind what he had when he was a little boy. And so that piece also was in a part of like a competition with maybe, I don't know how many anymore, but maybe let's say 100 works. And it won the audience award. And I found that it had a really strong emotional connection. Although it's a very simple story, but I think it's due to the story. It's also due to the form, because it felt really new. But it's due to the story that people had this emotional connection with it. And now to jump back to light festivals in general, they get like a lot of attention. It's big crowds, which is great, because it's not like only art-loving crowds, or you don't have to go to a museum. It's like your average Joe that goes to these kind of festivals. So in a way, it's really like a great platform to showcase your work. But I think it's really important that there is like a lot of different kind of works. Because after the festival last year, I was kind of frustrated in a way, because a lot of the things I saw, or a lot of the shows I saw, to me, it was very difficult to describe what I saw. It was a lot of lines and cubes and triangles, but I didn't know what I had seen in a way. And it felt like there was like a lot of random stuff happening, or a lot of playing with the software and the effects and the plugins. And in a way, it was like a VJ show, let's say. And the different chapters often didn't seem to be very linked or connected. And I didn't feel like emotionally connected to the works. And then I started to think, okay, why is this also in a way? And for me, if you think about the human brain, it's really typical for humans that they try to connect the dots and look for a pattern. You know, we look for like a cause and an effect. But if you don't see that pattern, for example, in some mappings which are more about the visual flesh, let's say, that I become frustrated in a way also, if I don't understand what's going on. And I think this kind of pattern recognition is what makes us special also, what makes us human, what sets us apart from a computer, let's say, that you start to imagine, you start to predict where whatever you're seeing is going, you know? So it triggers your mind, let's say. And I think that people are very bad in like dealing, maybe especially me, with dealing with random events. And I'm gonna explain this a bit more, because I mean, essentially we're like always looking for like a cause and effect. If you think about the thunder or a storm, they start to make up these stories that it must be some kind of like a god or something like that. And it's the same, for example, when you think about someone and they call you, you start to think, I have some kind of special telepathic connection with whoever is calling you. So, I mean, basically we create like small stories to make sense of the world around us. And it's this thing of the storytelling by the campfire that we've been doing for thousands of years. So for me to ignore this or not take this into account is a mistake. It's, of course, my opinion. So a story, I mean, basically it's like a chain of events. You have this this kind of known hero's journey or this 3-act structure from cinema, which when I was studying, I didn't give a shit about these kind of things. You know, I just wanted to be free and not be linked to these rules of how to do what. And even now, when I'm thinking of a new project or when we're thinking of a new petit chef, it's not like I start to go, okay, the petit chef starts and then there is this call to adventure and then there's the next step. But I did, after I graduated, I did start to read on books in storytelling and how they use that in movies or how they structure that in movies, because it's, even though you don't apply everything, of course, but it is interesting to kind of to see how that works and how effective it does work. And a lot of stories really comes down to motivation, and it's the motivation of your character that drives the story or that puts the story into action. And of course, it's also about characters, because at the end of the day, as an audience, you empathize with a character, and I think it kind of relates to is that Nuria? Is that the right pronunciation of the person before me? Because she was also talking about this human connection, what I often miss in this very abstract, kind of very digital, very cold projects. But as soon as you put, like what we were seeing before, as soon as you put a person in that environment, to me, it becomes a lot more interesting. And I think if you build up your story very well, you can kind of see the world through someone else's eyes. It's of course in great films, but that opens up your mind because you start to empathize with somebody in another position than you are. So I think it's a great how do you say, a great given to you story. Of course, in mapping, usually it's quite limited in time, and so usually end up making quite simple stories. But even then, with the simple stories, I think it's really important to ask yourself, like, okay, why does the building collapse? Is it like I don't know, did an elephant ran into it, or is it poorly constructed by the architect, you know, or was there like an earthquake, you know? Why are all these things happening? So I think it's really about asking a lot of questions to yourself, because at the end of the day, I think the audience will ask these same questions, which creates like a suspense, which creates an anticipation, which can be met or which can be played with, you know, which can be moved in a lot of directions. But basically, once they start asking these questions, they have emotionally invested in your story, and you can take them with you through different places. Because I have to say, I'm in a way, I'm kind of like a tech geek also, And I do love to try out new techniques and to do visually also something different. Because I do believe that having like a unique way to present your project is great to draw an audience in, like what I did with this projection on this sculpture, or, I mean, in general, mapping it's exciting because people haven't seen a lot of mappings before. But as I think once you have my attention, I think technique is just like a layer, or everything visual it's like a layer. And for me, it becomes a lot about a lot more about the story. Like the core of it should be about the story and the characters. And this is more movie-based, but at the end of the day, I would rather see a movie shot on a very old mini DV camera with an amazing story than to watch a movie with the best CGI and the newest cameras, you know, but with a crappy story. But of course, I think what is the best if you can combine the two things, and these are like examples of films, you know, the Birdman, because technically it's this one shot thing, which, and visually it feels very fresh, very interesting, but it's also the story that makes it so good. Or Eternal Sunshine of the Spotless Mind, the story itself is amazing, but it's also, it becomes even greater because visually it feels so, because visually it's so, yes, it's visually well done, let's say. And basically our process, or my process, is to write a script, to write a concept, and then, or to think of a concept and then to write a script. And I think it's very important that I take my time to do that, because it's also important to write something, leave it there for a couple of days and pick it up again. I don't think I've ever done a project successfully that I just wrote something and started immediately creating it, because it does take some kind of time to sink in, and it's also important to verbalize it, because if you tell it to people, you really start, even though it's very clear in your head, just by explaining it, you can discover like holes in your script or things that don't really make sense once you start to explain it to other people. And then we develop like a pre-visualization, which is like a very rough 3D animation. And we start to look for visual references, and then we create a project. For example, this is one of these Le Petit Chef projects, the visualization, which is of course very rough, but it gives an idea, or it gives also us an idea of how the timing works, or where the story is kind of dragging, or where there needs to be more things going on. So it's, and this doesn't take that much to create, but sometimes even me, I'm thinking, oh, let's just go for the final result, you know, and just skip this step. But I try to always oblige myself to take this step, because all the time you learn something from this, and if you fuck up somewhere, it doesn't matter, because you can easily change it in this stage. You know, even the tentacles and all that, we try to put that in. And even with, this is not for an animation project, but I do that even for live action music videos, that I make this kind of pre-visualizations. And to close, I would like to show a work by another artist from, I think they're a duo from Holland. And I saw it actually at the Brussels Light Festival. And it's quite a simple story, and it's an abstract characters in a way. But I did get the sensation that I was really connected to it. And it has, for me, all the elements that a good mapping needs, because it has the storytelling, but it also has the really fluent animation, really nice animation, and it does play with the building. So I will just show a piece from it. I mean, it's quite nice. You should, if you have the time, you should watch it. You can find it on our website. But it's basically, I don't know. I'm assuming the pink one is the girl, and she gets into trouble, you know, and she gets stuck in kind of this yellow glue or something. Anton calls them chewing gums, these characters. So, and he goes to save her in the end. So, if you have the time, I would definitely recommend it. What I also quite like is that it sticks to that theme. You know, it doesn't become like a forest and then a sea and then something else. It's like one universe, and we stay in that universe, which is interesting and which I think also relates what Nuria was saying, that you need to take time, or at least me also, I need to take time as a viewer to understand that world and understand the logic and the laws of that world to get that connection or to get into it, let's say. He'll be all right. She's saving him now. So, to conclude, I think it's really nice that you have so much diversity in mapping and so many people coming from completely different backgrounds. And I think it should definitely stay that way, because probably if there would be like a lot of storytelling in mapping, I would be here giving a lecture on abstract mapping and to be able to promote that. But so I would love to see like a mix between all these different forms and all these different artists coming from different fields. But I would love also to see very good storytelling mapping. Thank you.
It's on? Yeah. Because you mentioned the hero journey thing, I did my bachelor thesis on game design and other things like that. I wanted to ask, have you ever considered doing mini games or even interactive games with the same animations inside?
I mean, actually we have a bit, but for me interactivity, it's very difficult, for me at least, to combine that with storytelling, because if you give too much control also to your user, I really like a strong direction, or I like to do that also, you know, to give a strong direction. When you leave it up to the user, I mean, they don't know what they're doing. They're like playing around and trying to fuck with the game, and just doesn't, I mean, it doesn't feel always right. So, and it's the same with like when I used to play a lot of video games, for example, like Half-Life 2, or Half-Life 1, let's say, and you have this exciting music that starts and they're stuck running against the wall. And I remember I replayed a lot of scenes, even though I got through to the next level, I replayed them to get them like perfect, you know what I mean? Or like cinematographic or something like that. So I think interactivity is tricky. You have some artists that, for example, Chris Milk, his work in interactivity, I think that's really interesting. Or for example, I played this game Journey, which is also interactive, and I never had that feeling in a movie. You know, that was a completely different feeling, and that was amazing. For me, games were always a bit like lower in terms of like emotional connection than films, but that game suddenly jumped over that level even, or it gave me a different sensation than I got from watching a movie. So it's possible. It's just at the moment I'm not doing myself any interactive stuff, or I'm maybe it's like 10% interactive, but I don't see like giving too much control to the user. It's not really my thing. Or I think it's kind of frictions with storytelling sometimes also.
More questions?